You check your phone 47 times today without deciding to. You snap at someone you love over something small. You quit the diet on day 3 and tell yourself you have no willpower. You call this weakness, but the real answer is far stranger. Your brain isn't broken. It's ancient. And the people you call mentally strong aren't fighting their instincts. They've just learned to work with a machine built 200,000 years ago for a world that no longer exists. Your brain didn't evolve to help you finish a spreadsheet. It evolved to keep a small, hungry primate alive on a savanna full of things that wanted to eat it. Every habit you associate with mental toughness today is really just an old survival tool, repointed at a new target. Understanding that tool is the difference between fighting yourself for the rest of your life and finally working with your own wiring. Start with the first habit: emotional regulation. You feel a jolt of anger, a spike of fear, a wave of shame, and mentally strong people seem to just not. Do they feel less? No. Your ancestors needed a fast alarm system. A rustle in the grass had to trigger fear before conscious thought even arrived, because the ones who waited to think it over got eaten. That fast alarm still lives in your amygdala, the almond-shaped cluster deep in your brain that fires before your rational mind gets a vote. Mentally strong people haven't silenced that alarm. They've just built a half-second gap between the alarm and the action. That gap is trainable. It's the entire difference between reacting and choosing. Here's where the story gets stranger. In the late 1990s, psychologist Roy Baumeister ran a now famous experiment. He sat hungry participants in a room with a plate of fresh-baked cookies and a bowl of radishes, then told one group they could only eat the radishes. Afterward, both groups were given an unsolvable puzzle. The radish eaters, the ones who had just spent their willpower resisting cookies, gave up on the puzzle far faster. Baumeister called this ego depletion. Self-control, he argued, works like a muscle. Use it hard in one moment, and you have less of it in the next. Mentally strong people don't have a bigger muscle. They just spend it more wisely. They remove the radish plate entirely, instead of sitting next to it all day, gritting their teeth. Which brings you to the second habit: delayed gratification. You've probably heard of the marshmallow test. In the late 1960s, psychologist Walter Mischel put a single marshmallow in front of 4-year-olds and told them if they waited 15 minutes without eating it, they'd get a second one. Some children grabbed it in seconds. Others distracted themselves, sang songs, covered their eyes, turned their whole bodies away from the plate. Years later, Mischel tracked those same children into adulthood, and the ones who had waited tended to have better outcomes across almost every measure he checked. But here's what most retellings leave out. The children who waited longest weren't using raw willpower at all. They were using strategy. They looked away. They reframed the marshmallow as a cloud instead of a food. Mental strength, it turns out, was never about grinding through the craving. It was about outsmarting it. Why does any of this matter to a brain built for scarcity? Because for most of human history, gratification wasn't delayed by choice. It was delayed by nature. There was no marshmallow sitting on a plate for 15 minutes. There was a season of hunger before a season of harvest, a winter before a spring, a hunt that might fail 3 times before it worked once. Your ancestors who could tolerate that gap, who could keep moving through weeks without a guaranteed reward, were the ones who survived to pass on their genes. You inherited that same tolerance. Most people just never train it anymore because modern life removed almost every natural gap between wanting and having. Now the third habit, and it's the one people misunderstand the most: grit. In 2007, psychologist Angela Duckworth introduced a simple 2-part definition of grit, passion, and perseverance, sustained over years, not days. She studied cadets at West Point, salespeople, spelling bee competitors, and found something uncomfortable. Talent barely predicted who finished what they started. Grit did. Why would that be true? Think about what your ancestors actually needed. Not a burst of brilliance? A hunt could take days. A migration could take a season. The humans who quit at the first failed attempt didn't eat. The ones who kept adjusting their strategy and trying again did. You are descended, quite literally, from the ones who didn't give up. Which leads directly into the fourth habit, and it's where the story takes its sharpest turn. Resilience after failure. In 1967, psychologist Martin Seligman ran a series of experiments that, by today's ethical standards, would never be approved. Dogs were given mild shocks. They couldn't escape. Later, even when an easy escape route was available, many of those same dogs just lay down and took the shock again. Seligman called this learned helplessness. Failure, repeated enough times without any sense of control, teaches a mind to stop trying at all. But here's the twist that made Seligman famous decades later. Not every dog gave up. Some kept searching for the exit, no matter how many times they failed. And when Seligman turned his attention to humans, he found the same split. The difference wasn't the number of failures, it was the story each mind told about the failure. Was it permanent or temporary? Was it everything or just this one thing? Was it your fault entirely or partly circumstance? Mentally strong people aren't failing less than everyone else. Ask any of them and you'll hear the same thing. They've simply learned to tell themselves a different story about the failure the moment it happens. That story matters more than you think. The fifth habit follows directly from it. A growth mindset, a term coined by psychologist Carol Dweck after decades of watching how children respond to a hard problem. Some children see a difficult puzzle and say, "I can't do this yet." Others see the exact same puzzle and say, "I can't do this, full stop." That single word, "yet," changes everything downstream. Dweck found that children praised for being smart tended to avoid harder challenges, protecting their identity as the smart one. Children praised for their effort sought out harder challenges because effort, unlike intelligence, felt like something they controlled. Your ancestors never had the luxury of believing their abilities were fixed. Every skill, tracking, tool making, reading weather, had to be learned from nothing, usually by failing at it first, in front of people who depended on you to eventually get it right. The sixth habit is quieter than the rest, and it's the one almost nobody talks about. Boundaries. Saying no. Every mentally strong person you can think of has a reputation for protecting their time fiercely. Why would that be a survival trait? Because in a small tribal group, your energy wasn't infinite, and neither was anyone else's. A person who said yes to every demand burned out and became a liability to the group, not an asset. The ones who conserved their energy for what actually mattered lived to contribute for decades instead of burning out in a single, overextended season. You still carry that same finite battery. Modern life just added infinite demands on top of it, without adding a single extra hour to your day. And that brings you to the seventh habit, the one that ties every other habit together: meaning. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, writing from inside some of the darkest conditions a human being can survive, observed something almost impossible to explain through biology alone. The people who endured were not always the physically strongest. They were the ones who held on to a reason, a person to return to, a task left unfinished, a purpose bigger than the immediate suffering. Every habit before this one, the emotional regulation, the delayed gratification, the grit, the resilience, the growth mindset, the boundaries, none of it holds together without something to point it at. Meaning isn't the seventh habit sitting quietly at the end of a list. It's the direction all the other six were always pointing toward. So here's the strange part you were promised at the start. Mental strength was never a personality trait handed to a lucky few at birth. It's a set of tools your ancestors needed just to see tomorrow. Tools that sat mostly dormant in you because your environment stopped demanding them. The radish and the cookie, the marshmallow and the clock, the failed hunt and the next one, the unsolved puzzle and the word yet. The energy you refuse to give away for free. The reason you get up anyway. None of it is new. All of it is already wired into you. Waiting. Tonight, when you feel that jolt before you snap. When you reach for the thing you told yourself you'd wait on. Remember this. You're not weak for feeling the pull. You're human for feeling it. The only question left is the same one your ancestors answered 1,000 generations before you were born. Not whether the pull exists, whether you'll let it decide for you.